Welcome to the realm of science fiction, where imagination knows no bounds and extraordinary stories unfold. Enjoy the adventure. Yeyrathi Prime does not forget. The land whispers of war through scorched roots and fractured stone. Wind hums through shattered metal towers like a funeral dirge, and the trees, half mechanical, half organic, bear scars older than memory. Blossoms bloom from bullet casings. Pools shimmer with chemicals that glow beneath a ruined sun. Above it all, the sky splits, a permanent crack in the atmosphere from an orbital bombardment decades past. Its glow is crimson at dusk, violet at dawn, and never wholly still. Beneath it, life persists with the grim stubbornness of survivors. The Yeyrathi walk this wasteland like sacred shadows, furred, fanged, and bound by code older than any satellite. They mourn in silence and fight without mercy. They bury their dead in the roots of ancestral trees that scream when touched by human machines. They wear the bones of their fallen as armor, not for intimidation but remembrance. To them, humans are not conquerors, not anymore. They are trespassers, clumsy creatures who burn too hot and forget too fast. They build clinics on old battlefields and plant flags where the ground still bleeds. But something moves now beneath the jungle canopy. Not war, not yet. Something smaller, quieter. A mistake waiting to be made. Or maybe redemption waiting to take root. Jace Rennick lives between breaths he doesn't believe he deserves. His uniform bears no insignia, just bloodstains too old to scrub clean. Each motion of his hands is deliberate, practiced, penitent. He seals wounds, resets bones, and administers antitoxins to those who will never look him in the eye. The Yeyrathi elders watch from a distance, not with curiosity, but with calculation. To them, every action is weighed against memory, against grief, against the lives that humans once took beneath the shattered moons of Yeyrathi Prime. Still, he remains, not because he thinks he can be forgiven. He knows better. He stays because he must, because if pain must echo across generations, then maybe healing can too. Even if it comes from the same hands that once held a rifle, they call him Ghost Fixer in the old tongue, not out of affection, but because to them he tries to mend what cannot be unbroken. The line between the clinic and the wild is marked not by fences but by silence. Beyond that line, the air changes. It carries a charge, not static but judgment. Leaves hum with encoded warnings only the Yeyrathi fully understand. Glyphs pulse faintly in the bark, ancient and alive. To human eyes, it's just dense foliage. But to those who know, it's a graveyard of promises broken. No satellite map captures the weight of what lies beyond. Jace doesn't flinch at the thought of stepping over, not because he's brave, but because he's tired of avoiding ghosts. He's heard the stories of patrols that vanished, of medics, dragged back across the vines, alive but marked. Yet something in him stirs not with fear but with resignation. The jungle doesn't threaten him. It beckons. If penance walks on 2 feet, then maybe it deserves to be judged by something older than law. The tale drips through the market smoke and hangs in clinic corridors, half warning, half lullaby. The Yeyrathi call it the vow of flesh. When one saves a cub from death, blood answers blood, life bound to life. Not in metaphor, but in lore older than language. Jace hears it often now, in half-laughed phrases and sidelong glances. Most humans call it mysticism, tribal fantasy. But their mockery doesn't dull its sharpness. Not to those who've seen Yeyrathi eyes when the tale is told. Not to Jace, who feels the weight of the cub's breathing like a tether across his ribs. He doesn't believe in magic. He believes in muscle memory, in pressure points, in the sigh that comes when death lets go. But something about this myth clings to him, not because it's real, but because deep down he fears what it might mean if it is. Ash flutters like snow through the scarred canopy. The air tastes of charred resin and burned fur. Trees, once towering with alien grace, now bow as blackened skeletons. Something violent passed through here, something that didn't care what it crushed. Jace picks through the ruin, his boots crunching bone and ember. Training dulls the horror, not numbness, repetition, until a sound cuts through the static haze of his mind. A cry, weak, wet, alive. He finds the source beneath a fallen beam, small, breathing, and coated in soot. A Yeyrathi cub, the size of a human toddler but framed in slender muscle and downy stripes, one leg twisted, ribs heaving, eyes wide with a kind of fear older than war. Jace doesn't think. Instinct overrides diplomacy, overrides history. The field pack snaps open. Coagulants is splinting gel. Every second a countdown, the cub doesn't scream, just watches, blinks once. Trust offered not through language, but breath shared in firelight. Later, he will learn the meaning of this act. The cultural weight, the bonds it forges. But now there is only heat, blood, and the hands of a man who once broke things, now trying to save one small life from a world that forgets mercy. Jace lifts the cub with care forged in fire. Its warmth seeps into his arms, fragile, trembling but alive. His comms sputter useless static. No help's coming. Only him, only this path. His hands shake, not with panic, but the echo of another day. Another child. Another war zone. The weight, then, had been lighter. The silence after, louder. That one died screaming. This one still breathes. Each step he takes back toward the clinic is a defiance. Of orders, of history, of everything that says this isn't his problem. But the cub curls closer. Its heartbeat stutters against his ribs. Behind him, the jungle exhales. Not wind, not beast, something deeper. The trees feel it. So does the earth. Something old has marked this moment. It watches without eyes, judges without voice. It remembers the vow that once sealed peace in blood and breath. And now it waits for Jace to finish what he's unknowingly begun. Dusk crawls across Yeyrathi like an old wound reopening, bleeding rust-colored light through a torn sky. The clinic sits on the border of broken treaties and silent stairs, but today the silence trembles. She steps from the tree line like a myth recalled. Arasha, hunt matriarch of the Shattered Claw, moves with the grace of something that has never known fear, only survival. Her fur gleams with stormlight, braided, tight with tribal bones and beads. Old scars pattern her chest and thighs like stories etched in flesh. She does not speak. She kneels. Her claws, stained with ritual dye, extend toward Jace, palms open, unguarded, deadly. It is not submission. It is sacrifice. The rite of flesh. Made manifest. A declaration older than writing, deeper than blood. Jace blinks. He sees a proud alien woman bowing to him, and all his training, all his reason, short circuits. His fingers twitch around the data slate. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't protocol. It's something else, something sacred. The Yeyrathi. Gathered nearby watch in stillness, eyes reflecting firelight and judgment. To them he has invoked the ancient rite. He saved a cub not his own. He bled to protect it. He is now bound, mate, protector, second sire. No words can undo what instinct already sealed. Jace shifts, unsure whether to kneel or run. Arasha remains unmoving, waiting for his acceptance, or his refusal. But in this place, among this people, even silence answers loudly. And behind her, the cub peeks from behind tribal healers, eyes wide with something more than recognition. Something like hope. The universe has shifted by inches, and Jace, scarred, tired, unwilling, has just stepped into a story far older than himself. Torches flicker as dusk gives way to the deep breath of night. The elders emerge, draped in hide, and light-woven glyphs, their steps slow, deliberate, echoing through the jungle like the voice of the past, returning to claim its due. They form a circle around the cub, around Jace, around fate itself. One steps forward, his muzzle marked with the ink of lineage and law. His voice, cracked by age and command, does not ask. It declares, "He who saves the bloodline shall inherit its bond." No translation needed. The weight is felt in marrow, not meaning. The rite is older than the schism between stars. It predates warp drives and empires. It's a covenant written in the first scream of life born under threat. The rite says that blood saved is blood claimed. The one who shields a child from death takes on the mantle of kin, of mate, of oath-bound soul. It is not metaphor, it is mandate. Species does not matter. Belief does not matter. Choice no longer matters. The cub stands now between them, tiny, limping, fur still matted with dried blood, and clutches Jace's hand with a strength born of instinct and ancestral truth. And so it is done. Myth has spoken. Protocol obeys. She stands before them, shoulders squared, claws bared, not in threat but in truth. Arasha's voice cuts through the gathering like a spear through mist. There is no hesitation, no ceremony, only the ancient declaration, "He is mine." Not possession, not passion, purpose. The Yeyrathi do not pair for pleasure, they bind for lineage. A mate is a fortress, a promise, a guardian of the future. To declare one is to expose the softest part of the soul and risk it to the judgment of the tribe. And Arasha has risked much. Jace doesn't speak at first. He fumbles with the translator patch, the words stumbling out like cracked static. "Wait, I think this isn't what I..." They mistake the panic in his voice for ritual humility. To them, his flushed face and trembling hands are the signs of sacred awe. They nod, murmuring approval, seeing ancient customs fulfilled in the breathless human who dared save a cub not his own. The elders lift their staffs. The crowd bows in concentric circles. The cub churs softly and clings tighter to his leg. And still Jace stares, uncomprehending, into the eyes of a hunt matriarch who has just claimed him with the force of law, legacy, and lifeblood. He tries to explain, she tries not to hope. Neither quite succeeds. Above them, the jungle breathes and watches, and the rite roots itself deeper. The fire crackles with voices older than stars. Songs rise, raw, rhythmic, reverent, each note a thread in the tapestry of a rite deeper than words. Arasha does not sing, she watches, eyes like carved obsidian, unblinking, unshaken. Jace sits apart, yet not alone. Every breath he draws feels borrowed. The warriors do not approach, yet their gaze holds him like gravity. Not suspicion, not malice. Something stranger, something heavier. He shifts under their eyes, not from fear but from weight. The weight of being seen, not as a soldier, not as a medic, not as a man clawing through guilt, but as something they understand in bone and story, a chosen one, a lifeblood binder, a name written in flame. Arasha says nothing, yet in her silence is something fierce, not desire, not yet, but recognition, a measure taken, a judgment withheld. He meets her gaze, unsure what burns hotter, the fire between them or the one behind her eyes. He has fought wars for flags that forgot his name. He has saved lives that blurred into ash, but tonight, under alien stars and ancestral chants, someone looks at him and does not look away, and it terrifies him, because part of him wants to stay. The comlink crackles with urgency, not warmth. Cold metal words slice through static. Disavow immediately, this is a legal disaster. Somewhere in orbit, protocols scream louder than pulse beats, but the child sleeping against his ribs does not know the language of treaties. She only knows that he came when no one else did. Orders clash against instincts honed not by command but consequence. He remembers the last mission, the last child, the last failure. This one still breathes. Jace stares into the dark where Arasha waits, silent and still as a carved idol. Her eyes do not plead, they do not threaten, they promise, not war, not peace, something older. A bond no contract can sever. He doesn't speak back into the comm. What could he say that would be understood? That a third child called him second seer with trembling breath, that her blood had mixed with his on broken soil, that honor here was measured not in rank, but in rescue. The voice on the other end grows louder, more desperate, but Jace turns it off. He is no diplomat, no warrior anymore. But in the eyes of the Yeyrathi, he is something sacred. He watches the cub twitch in her sleep, clutching his coat with tiny claws. Arasha meets his gaze from across the fire. She does not smile. She does not need to. Some laws are written in ink, others in blood, and Jace has already bled. Jace stands beneath twin moons, where shadows wear the shape of decision. The transmission from command still echoes in his mind, urgent, sterile, foreign. A world of regulations, political optics, and deniable operations. That world knows his name, his rank, his file. But not his soul. The jungle breathes around him, ancient and unflinching. Here, legacy is not filed or stamped. It is etched in blood, sung in scars. And across from him sits Arasha, unmoving, unreadable. She does not plead. That would be weakness. She does not threaten. That would be beneath her station. But her gaze speaks volumes of rites older than language, of lineage woven not from affection, but from sacred responsibility. and on his lap, warmth. A weight small in body, but massive in consequence. The cub sleeps curled into him, purring faintly, her breath slow, unafraid. She dreams, and in her dreaming tongue she calls him what no one else has. Second Sire. He flinches at the title, not out of rejection but out of grief. There was once another child, another war zone, another scream, and a cradle of silence that still echoes in his ribs. This cub is not that child, but the universe in its cruel elegance offers strange chances for redemption. His world wants him back, demands clarity, neutrality, paperwork. But clarity is a myth here, and neutrality, impossible. Not when lives hang between the lines. He glances at Arasha. Her posture is a vow. If he leaves, she will not stop him. But if he stays, she will never let go. In that moment, Jace does not think of flags or consequences. He thinks of the cubs, tiny claws gripping his jacket, and for once he does not feel like a soldier or a ghost. He feels chosen. The jungle welcomed him with silence, but not peace. Vines curled like tendrils of memory, clutching stone paths etched in runes too old to translate. Each step Jace took into the Yeyrathi stronghold felt like trespass. Not because he wasn't allowed, but because he shouldn't have been allowed. The eye. Stone beneath his boots pulsed faintly, as if it remembered. Generations had walked here barefoot, clawed, marked in blood and rite. He walked shod and alien, trailing doubt like a scent. Children peeked from behind branches, their luminous eyes wide and unblinking. They whispered in tones just shy of contempt, fascinated by his skin, his lack of tail, his flat teeth. He caught fragments of their words: Second Sire, Outworlder, Ghostwalker, each wrapped in curiosity and warning. The elders didn't whisper. They stared, not with fear but with expectation sharpened into scrutiny. Every move he made was measured against myths and lore. When he bent to touch a sacred carving, an elder flinched. When he nodded in greeting, a priestess turned her face. Away, he wasn't hated. He was observed, studied, awaited. The jungle itself seemed to join the examination. Trees hummed with low vibrations, threads of ancestral data singing through their veins. Leaves flickered with bioluminescent signals when he passed. The air tasted of pollen and prophecy. Jace's hands trembled not from fear, but from the weight of being seen, truly seen for the first time in years. Not as a soldier, not as a mistake, not as a burden, but as a question, one the Yeyrathi had never had to ask before. What does it mean when the outsider is chosen? He moved forward, eyes on the path, feeling the jungle shift around him. Behind, every leaf, judgment. Beneath every root, memory. Ahead, destiny not yet spoken aloud. He emerged from the dusk like a storm held upright, taller than any warrior Jace had seen, silver mane braided with bone charms, his burn-scarred flesh shimmering beneath ceremonial ash. Valkor didn't speak, he didn't have to. His presence screamed what words never could. This should have been mine. Before the rite, before the human, the elders had whispered Arasha's future into Valkor's waiting claws. Strength recognized strength. Bloodlines preserved legacy. It was already decided, until one act of mercy shattered decades of planning. Now that act stood between him and everything he'd bled for. The challenge wasn't shouted. It was declared in posture, in the sacred markings carved into the soil, in the clang of obsidian rings locked around his wrists. The jungle knew what was coming. It fell silent, even the wind refusing to intrude. Jace didn't know the gestures, didn't understand the symbols, but the intent was clear. Valkor circled with slow, deliberate menace. Arasha did not interfere. No one did. Because this wasn't about emotion, it was law, older than speech. A rite of confrontation had been invoked. And Jace, outworlder, medic, wrong-footed savior, was now a piece in a game he didn't know how to play. Every breath was watched, every twitch measured, and though he carried no blade, he felt the cut of 1,000 eyes carving his worth into the air. He had no plan, no translator, no advantage, only a heartbeat, and the memory of a cub whispering Second Sire with belief strong enough to shake the stars. Above the canopy, just beyond the veil of atmosphere, a sleek orbital prowler hovered in silence, its stealth skin glimmering like obsidian water. Inside, a strike team reviewed Jace Rennick's biometrics with expressions carved from suspicion and steel. To them, He was no longer a medic, no longer even a man. He was a variable, a breach, a target. Command believed he'd gone native, embedded, too deep, maybe even genetically marked by the alien rite. In war zones like Yeyrathi Prime, diplomacy wasn't protocol, containment was. The last signal they'd received from him was fragmented, unintelligible, then nothing. Silence bred assumptions, and assumptions sharpened triggers. Below, the jungle shimmered, alive with biocode and myth, but when a brief flicker pulsed, through the canopy, disrupting the tribal cloaking fields for just 3 seconds, every satellite sensor caught it. That flicker was all it took. Green light authorized at boots readied. Mechs whispered wake sounds. Plasma rifles synchronized on his heat signature. Unaware, Jace moved through the village like a ghost uncertain of its death, caught between rights and suspicion. The tribe watched, him with one kind of tension, the sky watched with another. In that moment, the vines didn't just pulse with life, they pulsed with warning. An ancient intelligence, organic and unseen, recognized the disruption. It sent its whispers deep into the jungle's bones. The humans had forgotten this place was never just flora, and the jungle had never forgotten what it was to fight. The sky above Yeyrathi dimmed not with clouds but with reverence. The jungle hushed as the tribe formed a living circle, pulsing with low rhythmic chants. In its center lay the body of a young Yeyrathi, wrapped not in cloth, but in woven vines and ceremonial ash. Her fur shimmered with sacred oil. Her claws, broken in battle, were polished with obsidian dust. She had died a warrior. She would rise as a memory. Jace stood at the edge, heart beating like a hunted animal. This was no quiet mourning. It was violent remembrance. A knife slit each mourner's palm. Blood was offered to the soil. Bones were cracked open to honor what was endured, not what was lost. Every gesture meant something ancient, something binding. The girl's remains were placed into the hollow of a heart tree, an enormous breathing organism pulsing with neural light. As her body touched the root core, the tree responded. Bioluminescent veins surged upward, glowing with hues Jace had no name for. And then the tree began to sing, not with sound but with memory. Images poured into the clearing. The girl's first hunt, her laughter under twin moons, her final scream. The tribe danced, howled, moved as one. Their grief was a fire, their joy a blade. Jace flinched at the rawness, the blood, the vulnerability. Beside him, Arasha said nothing. She simply watched him. Her eyes didn't seek strength. They sought understanding. Would he recoil? Would he judge? Or would he see? And Jace, whose past was paved in silent graves and forgotten names, did not look away. He watched, he listened, and in that moment, he became something more than guest. He became a witness. Beneath the slow-burning glow of torch fruits, where fireflies whispered through thick leaves like ancient secrets, Arasha sat beside him, not close, not far, just near enough that silence could be mistaken for intimacy. The rite, she explained, was never about affection. It was continuity, bloodline before bond, survival before sentiment. Mates were chosen not by hearts, but by worth, the kind earned through wounds and sacrifice. To save a cub was to become bound, not to love but to obligation. Jace said nothing at first. What could he say? He had seen too many versions of love, most of them ending in graves. He knew duty, he knew regret, but this was something raw, old, uncompromising. And yet as she spoke, something flickered behind her eyes, something unspoken, a hesitation not born of fear, but of curiosity. She was the matriarch, the warrior, the one who chose. But tonight she lingered. Her gaze didn't weigh him as a protector or a provider. It studied him as something unfamiliar, something gentle. Jace reached for a fallen torch fruit, its glow faint against his fingers. She watched the way he handled. Fit, not like a soldier but like a healer, careful, present. And in that pause, when neither of them spoke, the air changed, not with desire, not with duty, but with the fragile beginning of understanding. She didn't say she would choose him again. She didn't need to. The fact that she stayed, long after the fire dimmed, said enough. The child's eyes shifted in ways they shouldn't, reflecting, memories not his own, He whispered in dreams, not in words, but in thoughts that echoed into the bone. The jungle bent toward him, branches leaning as if drawn by reverence or fear. When he wept, it rained where it shouldn't. When he giggled, birds stopped singing. Jace, ever the skeptic, ran scans in secret. Biofeedback, neural resonance, energy flux. The data painted a picture too impossible to ignore. The cub was psionically active, not the faint ripples of an empath or a seer, but a tidal force, dormant and growing. A mind that could reach across species, translate emotion, maybe even rewrite allegiance without a word. No civilization was built to welcome that. Earth would cage him in a lab. The Yeyrathi, High Council might declare him a threat to the bloodline's purity. Everyone would want to study, possess, or silence him. Jace watched the child play with vines and shadow creatures, oblivious to the danger humming beneath his skin. This was no longer just about a debt or a right. It was about keeping a living. Key from falling into the wrong hands. Trust couldn't be given anymore. It had to be forged. In silence, in grit, in the vow not yet spoken aloud, he would protect the cub, even if the galaxy turned against him for it. By the fire's warmth, they traded tools and stories. Jace showed the young warriors how to mix jungle resin with saline and solar ash to disinfect wounds, how to save a limb with a needle and patience rather than fire and steel. In return, Arasha showed him how to read the soul written in scars. A mark on the shoulder for shielding a friend. A slash across the ribs for surviving betrayal. The silent map of a life etched on skin, each line a page. They argued over methods, laughed over failures. She mocked his clumsy grip on a Yeyrathi blade. He teased her inability to pronounce suture. Yet somewhere in the laughter, formality broke. So did suspicion. She began to speak without weighing every word. He began to listen without assuming every pause held judgment. When the cub nestled, between them, neither flinched, neither moved. They weren't just allies bound by law anymore. They were something harder to define, something rarer, something earned. The first blast came from above, a streak of heat and ion fire cleaving jungle. Leaves into ash. Raiders moved like phantoms, cloaked in stolen Earth tech. Their rifles hummed with deadly recognition, tuned to pierce Yeyrathi armor. Warriors fell. Screams rose. Jace didn't freeze. He calculated. Then he moved. He used mirrored water to scatter sensor readings, flung crushed fruit to confuse heat, signatures. Lured raiders into traps meant for beasts, nets woven from thorn spider silk and baited with bone echoes. Arasha's warriors followed without question. Not because he commanded, but because he adapted. He made human thinking fit alien ground. When it was over, 3 lives had been saved. One of them, Valkor's blood sister. The fire crackled. The air shook. The tribe did not bow. But they did something older than ritual. They chanted his name not as a stranger, not as a mistake, as one of their own. The jungle sang with drums, low, deep, ancient rhythms that matched the pulse of the earth and every breath held by those gathered. The amphitheater was alive, suspended between trees like a cathedral spun from bonavine and threads of light. Starlight shimmered in the silk-draped canopy, casting shifting constellations across the faces of hundreds. Elders, warriors, children, witnesses to a moment that would be told in fire chants long after their bones had returned to root and soil. Arasha stood radiant beneath the high boughs, draped in the legacy of her line, armor etched with the blood marks of her ancestors, her fur braided with memory tokens of every kill, every loss. She did not smile. She did not waver. She stood like thunder waiting to break. Jace wore honor, awkwardly. The ceremonial mantle draped across his shoulders bore sigils he could not read. Every step forward felt like a negotiation between humility and defiance. But he did not stumble. He did not bow. The rite of union was not a wedding, not in the way Earth might define it. It was acknowledgement, claim, consequence. The crowd didn't cheer, they chanted. One syllable at a time, low and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of gods older than either species. This wasn't just a joining, it was a rewriting of what law meant, of who could belong. And Jace, human outsider, stood at its center, chosen, questioned, unafraid. From the shadows of the gathered canopy, a howl cut the chant clean. Valkor stepped forward, bare-chested and burning with fury. His silver mane glinted like moonlight on wet stone. his scars glowing faintly from oil fire drawn across his blade. Firethorn. Poisonous, ceremonial, sacred. He did not speak in Earth languages, he didn't need to. He invoked the trial with one drawn line across his own chest and a blade pointed at Jace. Blood or surrender. No other path. To walk away would be to walk away from everything. Respect, trust, the bond. To fight meant accepting Yeyrathi law as one's own. Jace stepped into the ring, unarmed, untrained in their ways. His boots disturbed ash from trials long buried. His heart pounded like the drums, not from fear, but from clarity. He wouldn't kill, but he wouldn't yield. The arena fell silent. Not even leaves dared whisper. Warriors leaned forward. Elders gripped their staffs. Arasha's breath held still in her throat. This wasn't just a duel, it was proof of whether humanity's soul could speak with tooth and claw. Jace raised his hands, not in surrender, in readiness, because some battles weren't about dominance. They were about daring to stand in the fire and not let it change who you were. Velkor struck first, a blur of fury and fire. Claws slashed where heads once would have rolled. But Jace didn't meet strength with strength. He moved, listened, watched, studied. He scattered mirrored shards from his survival kit across the ring's dirt, released echo flares that mimicked footsteps in 6 directions. He played the arena like a battlefield, not of blades but of misdirection. Every time Velkor lunged, Jace vanished like smoke. Every growl met silence. Every feint found only dust. Jace refused to strike with fist or blade. He struck with a wit, with strategy. He lured the warrior into his own momentum, used a snapped vine as a tripline, flung an empty plasma casing to draw a lunge, and finally, pivoted and dropped Velkor onto his back, breathless, blinking at a sky. That did not answer. The arena didn't roar, it froze, then drumbeats, then chants. Then, voices rose like wind catching fire. They hadn't seen a victor. They'd seen something rarer, a man who wouldn't shed blood to earn place. Only dignity. Only effort. Jace offered Velkor a hand. It was taken, grudgingly, respectfully. The right did not break. It deepened. The final strike never came, not from Jace, not from Velkor. It came from a heartbeat too small to stand trial. The cub, nestled at the edge of the amphitheater, trembled, not from cold or pain, but from the weight of the moment cracking its fragile sense of self. Then it cried, not with voice, but with soul. A pulse erupted, silent, searing, pure. Thoughts, not its own, bled into the minds of every Yeyrathi present. Grizzled warriors staggered, elders fell to one knee. The young wailed, not knowing why. Inside each mind bloomed images not conjured by speech or gesture. Jace clutching a bloodied child, another time, another world. Screams that never stopped. A battlefield turned grave. And now, his arms cradling. This new child shaking but holding fast. His terror, his longing, his resolve. Arasha gasped. Velkor flinched. The tribe wept. No words followed. There were none needed. The cub had spoken in a way no elder could refute. The truth had worn human skin. And now they all wore his pain. High above Yeyrathi Prime, where satellites whispered to sleeping systems and void silence blanketed forgotten ruins, a beacon stirred. Its activation was neither planned nor manned. Its code etched into protocol during the last age of hope. The rite had been witnessed. The trial of honor had completed. And the psychic flare, raw biological proof of cross-species lineage and consent, had triggered a clause buried in forgotten diplomatic archives. With a single pulse of blue across the jungle canopy, the beacon lit, not like a flare, like judgment. Screens across orbiting relay ships flickered to life. The message was clear. In accordance with Accord Article 17C, subsection Delta, cross-bonded interstellar union recognized. Subject, Rennick, Jace. Designation, Liaison Human Yeyrathi Alliance. Status, permanently bound, cannot be revoked without civil war or death. In the amphitheater below, the elders knelt, some in rage, some in reverence. Arasha did not move. Jace stared skyward, breath caught. No one explained what came next. There was no protocol for this, because once, long ago, a coalition of peacekeepers had written a clause into law, believing such unions might never truly happen. Now that hypothetical had flesh, blood, memory, and a name: Jace Rennick. He wasn't just a medic. He wasn't just a mistake. He was now a symbol to both Earth and Yeyrathi Prime. The bridge no one asked for, but the one the universe had answered. The jungle whispered in silver that night. Moonlight glazed the treetops in quiet reverence. The drums were gone. The chants had faded. Only breath remained, and choice. Arasha led Jace beyond the amphitheater's edge, past roots carved with names, into the hollowed quiet of the memory pool. It reflected not just faces, but truths. She didn't offer comfort. That was not her way. But she spoke, clear. Measured. If he stayed, he would become Yeyrathi, not in blood but in vow. His name would pass into their oral code. His child, hers by bond, would carry both their legacies, but Earth would not wait. His former commanders would disavow him. Politics would treat him as rogue. No medals, no pardons, no return. To stay was to be rewritten. Jace didn't answer immediately. He stared at the water, at his reflection, at the way the cub curled against him, purring softly, one small hand clutching his worn military dog tag. He had once believed purpose came from duty, from orders shouted and followed, from missions survived, medals earned, pain buried. But here, he had found purpose in silence. In a child's laughter, in the way Arasha watched him not with ownership but recognition. He remembered war, he remembered loss. Now, he remembered breath, not survival, living. When he finally spoke, it was not dramatic, not ceremonial. It's already here. Arasha bowed, not in submission but in agreement. The pool shimmered, the jungle sighed, and somewhere in the shadows, prophecy took a breath. Because not all legacies are born, some are chosen. The suns rose like eyes opening over a new world. Twin orbs of gold and crimson bathed Yeyrathi Prime in solemn fire, igniting dew-laced leaves and bone-stone altars with liquid light. Beneath them stood two beings born of war, one of fur and ritual, the other of scars and silence. They did not kneel. They did not shout oaths to the sky. Instead, their hands met over a totem, half woven from jungle silk, half from shredded earth-issued cloth. The braid held no magic, yet in its threads was the language neither of them had learned, but both had lived. No priest spoke, no elder sanctioned, and yet the world shifted. This was not the end of bloodshed, not the undoing of generations marred by distrust, but it was the planting of something unspoken, something rare, an alien matriarch who could have killed him. A human soldier who once might have feared her. Now both stood still, unafraid. The rite completed not in conquest, but in quiet promise. Not mine, not yours, just ours. And as the suns climbed higher, casting their joined shadows long across the jungle floor, no one in the canopy dared to question what had just become truth. Stories travel faster than fire when carried by awe. And the tale of the human who completed the rite, without blade, without betrayal, burned through the canopy like wind flame. Rival matriarchs gathered in shadowed nests to argue in hushed tones. What did it mean when an outsider followed ancient law better than their own warriors? Was tradition violated or fulfilled? Children mimicked the braid ceremony in play. Hunters touched earth metal trinkets with unexpected reverence, and warriors, those born to guard and bleed, began to speak his name. Not with disdain, not with challenge, with curiosity. Once, to mention a human was to summon rage or ridicule. Now it summoned pause. The jungle didn't change overnight. The scars remained. But for the first time in living memory, a whisper took root. What if the law of the rite was bigger than blood? He walked unarmed. No armor, no rifle, only scars, sun and steady steps. Once his gait had been read as threat. Now it marked familiarity. Children no longer flinched. They raced toward him. Elders nodded instead of retreating. And Jace no longer flinched either. He didn't need to. He carried no orders, only gauze and makeshift filters. Knowledge, passed through words and hand signs. He taught pressure stops and burn cleaning using jungle roots. In return, they taught him songs that healed shame, not just skin. The ghost of the Marine still walked beside him. But the man who walked in his place had a different mission now, one no uniform ever assigned. Not just healing bodies, healing history. And so, where once stood a weapon, now walked a bridge. One that looked forward, one that whispered, maybe peace doesn't arrive with thunder. Maybe it walks barefoot, one step at a time. She watches without comment, her breath hidden beneath bone armor and duty. Arasha, hunt matriarch, blade dancer, war mother, had once called him strange prey. An unpredictable anomaly with soft hands and haunted eyes. Now she watches with something else, not suspicion, not command, curiosity, and something softer. He does not try to impress her. He does not posture. When warriors argue, he listens. When wounds break open, he kneels and closes them with care. When the cub laughs, he smiles and forgets the weight he carries. Respect is not demanded in the Yeyrathi way. It is earned through suffering, sacrifice, and silence. She sees it in him. That night, beneath the roots of the ancestral tree, she stands before the clanstone. With the cub humming the song of memory beside her, Arasha carves two names into the bark-veined stone. Not for ceremony, not for spectacle, for truth. One name forged in fire, the other healed by it. The fire crackles beneath twin moons. Elders gather, their fur painted with ash and oil. The cub steps forward, small but sure. For the first time, his voice carries the weight of the old tongue. Two names, spoken not as labels but as legacy. Jace of Skyblood, Arasha of Boneflame. The words hang in the air like prophecy. The tribe repeats them in unison, not out of ritual, but recognition. Here stood a human, not shaped by orders, but by choices. Not honored for killing, but for refusing to. Not remembered, for blood spilled, but for peace given. Across Telyari's stars his name begins to travel. Not as soldier, not as exile, as myth. And Jace, once lost in war and wandering, now lives in the stories children will whisper long after the last drumbeat fades. The moon was forgotten, nameless, charted only in obsolete star maps. A desolate, rock-orbiting a dying gas giant, cloaked in silence and wind. And yet it breathed. Beneath its crust, ruins waited. Angular stone kissed by time, threaded with veins of circuitry long dormant. Human instruments detected only faint static. Yeyrathi. Senses felt nothing, but as they stepped closer, a hum rippled beneath the sand. They touched it. Nothing changed. Then the cub stepped near. The wind stopped. Stone shifted. Symbols blinked. The circuitry flared like a heartbeat restarting. Not in recognition of species, but of something rarer, bloodline. The ruins responded not to force or intellect. They answered only to what had never existed before. Hybrid, air, key. The transmission arrived wrapped in silence. No signature, no protocol, no language known. Just a pulse of light, encrypted in ancient glyphs. Military scanners failed. Diplomatic archives offered nothing. But Arasha saw the symbols and did not blink. Names carved in blood, bond, and prophecy. Hers, Jace's, the cub's. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a command. It was older than both, older than war, older than fear, a summons. Not to battle, but to purpose. The message made no promises of power. It spoke nothing of conquest, but it whispered of legacy, of unity, of being chosen not because they were strong, but because they were the first to belong. And when it ended, only one path remained. They would go. Together. The sight pulsed like a slumbering thought. Stones whispered in subharmonics only the cub seemed to hear. As they approached, the silence deepened. Reverent, watching. Jace stood with his hand over Arasha's, the cub between them, eyes wide, silent but not afraid. The core of the ruin called to the child alone. She stepped forward, laid, fingers against the stone. It awoke, colors unfolded like breath. Symbols danced, first jagged, then fluid, forming meaning beyond language. A voice emerged, not from air, but from light. The seed has merged. Unity proven. Phase 1. Initiate. No one understood the full weight of the words, but they understood what it meant. This was no relic of the past. This was a beginning. The jungle rites, the war scars, the oath-bound love. All of it had led here, not to an end, but a genesis. The universe was watching, not for soldiers, not for survivors, but for them. 3 lives, 1 bond. The first note in a song the stars had waited centuries to hear.